Next one is Death Parade. So Death Parade was a really cool concept anime. It's a very short anime. I don't think there was more than one season.
Wasn't it like 12 episodes or something only?
Yeah,
like one of those.
Yeah, 12 episodes. So it's a short anime. Basically, the storyline is that when someone dies, they go into like what is, I guess, purgatory, and they go into like these mysterious bars. So these bars represent purgatory, and they're run by a bartender who challenged them to a death game, which has their soul on the line. And how they do, if you know the person who died, how they do will reveal, first of all, how they got to where they are, like why they are in purgatory, and also decides what will happen to them afterwards.
Kind of testing their character.
Yeah, kind of testing the characters. And then I guess it's the bartender who decides what happens to them. I can't remember if it's the bartender.
Yeah, like the bartenders are kind of like, I don't know if guardian angels are the right thing, but they're basically the judges.
Yeah.
And they set up the games very like deliberately to be like, okay, I know you've had these issues, so I'm gonna pair you up and then I'm gonna test you out. Yeah. Like I think I saw a clip recently on YouTube where I was like, oh, I completely forgot about that. Where one of the pairs is like a fan of a pop star, and then the pop star himself playing like a game of Twister together.
So yeah, so the story is about this one bartender called Decim, who's the bartender of the Queen Decim bar, and yeah, he oversees the death games in his bar, and he judges, and he has like a weird hobby of like making mannequins which resembles his guests, those guests that made like a really good impression on him. But he's supposed to have like no human emotions, but he starts developing like slight human emotions, and then he has like a fondness to someone called Kyuko, who arrives in the bar but has no memory of her life or even her real name. She works as an assistant at Decim's bar and learning about his methods about being an arbiter, and then I think it's her that makes him start feeling things, emotional and affectionate and stuff like that. So it's a really good one.
Yeah, isn't it also kind of like the twist in the end when, as she starts remembering, instead of giving her a death game, he kind of judges her based on how she helped him open his eyes to human flaws?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's what happened.
Because they had that whole segment, I remember that one, where they did figure skating together, and that's how she remembered her life, that she used to do figure skating, and then she did like, she fell and like broke her ankle or something and couldn't do it anymore, and she used to do it competitively and really love it.
Yeah. And
I'm pretty sure she killed herself because of the depression that she couldn't compete
She killed
anymore.
herself? Was that,
Didn't she?
I guess
I'm quite sure she did.
Okay, well yes. She killed herself. We'll go with that. If not, we're wrong. Sorry. Yeah, so she did. So she's working with Decim, and you start seeing them play the game with other people who arrive into the bar, and you just see like Decim starting to develop like a human emotion. And so it's quite good for 12 episodes. You know, for the story that it was telling, it didn't need to be any longer, and if it was any shorter, it wouldn't be very satisfying. So it was quite satisfying. There wasn't a real villain though, so I don't know if that bothers anyone, then this might not be for you, because there is like a thing where Decim's boss, who's Nona, she reports to this guy called Oculus, who's basically the god, and Nona's basically just kind of concerned like, oh, is Decim developing these things and he's not going to be doing his job properly? But Nona doesn't really, it's not really that strong, that like kind of like, you know, in the show you have to have like something to overcome, like some sort of like antagonist or some sort of, it wasn't that strong. Like she wasn't like, oh, this is wrong. She was just like, okay, this is kind of happening, but whatever. Yeah,
it was more focused on like the people coming down to the games and their emotions towards each other, like showing human flaws. So it's more like a psychological kind of, you gotta be into like psychological animes. Unlike other psychological animes, because there are many out there, and some of them tend to be a lot slower paced, whereas this was more like fun and entertaining, an entertaining way to look at human flaws and human emotions, and how people tend to blame each other for things that have happened even though it's out of their control. And I remember when it was advertised, one thing that got people really, really excited was that there was like really, really, really short cameo of Light Yagami in the anime.
Yeah.
Like such a short cameo. That was one of Decim's guests where he was like, yeah, I was very interested in this guy.
Yeah, that was really funny. He was just, I remember that scene so well because I'm a huge Death Note fan, and it was just Light sitting at the bar by himself with a drink. And I remember Destin saying like, oh, this young man, he's went through some stuff. And I think he was saying like, there is no afterlife for him. He's just stuck here or something. Like, so that was interesting. I think, I don't know how that happened. I wonder if they had the same creators or same studio, but yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, it was.
I liked the beginning music. It was by a band called Bradio, who I listened to. Yeah, it's pretty okay anime. It's a nice 12 episode. Nothing too heavy, nothing to rave about, but it wasn't anything to dislike, if it makes sense.
Yeah, it's a fun flick that you can finish it in a day. It's not like it'll keep you entertained, and the art style is pretty good as well. Like it has good lights, it has good CGI effects as well. And I'm pretty sure when we're in the bar, it just has this, if I remember correctly, this smooth jazz music. So like also if you like jazz music, you'll have like that little extra bone that you can just enjoy jazz music for a while.
So I'm inclined to play a Handsome Pig because, I mean, yeah, it's just a story of him developing these feelings and the lack of something to overcome, like, or something to try and stop Nona and Oculus trying to stop him. It wasn't very strong, that bit, you know, and I guess that's the way it's written, the story, but
yeah,
it might be a bit like, why am I watching this? What am I rooting for? Kind of thing. So it's not a bad anime. So I'll probably put it between Painting Roses Red and A Handsome Pig because I would recommend this. Like, people who are really into anime and not obsessed with like just fighting and, you know, action and power-ups and stuff like that. This is just like, oh, chilled anime to watch. Then this one I definitely recommend. So probably between those two.
Yeah, I was also thinking Handsome Pig because the thing with the Handsome Pig, the way I read it is, it can still be an okay or a good anime. It doesn't have to be like necessarily bad. It feels like it is for a certain crowd because you definitely have to enjoy shows. Like it's kind of like Hellgirl, where it's like it's not really that there is an antagonist, it's just looking at humans and their flaws and emotions and feelings and trialing humans. So it's like you kind of have to be into that vibe to enjoy this anime, which, you know, isn't a bad thing. It's just a thing. So I think, yeah, either like you say A Handsome Pig or between A Handsome Pig and Painting the Roses Red. Because you definitely need to be a certain person, I think, or enjoy certain things to really enjoy this.
Okay, so we can put it in A Handsome Pig. Okay, next up is another Netflix anime called Great Pretender, which Alice and I watched last year. It's about this, initial main character is a guy called Makoto Edamura, or Edamame, after the Japanese P kind of thing. He's a kid who lives in Japan and he's basically adopted a life of crime. He does pickpocketing, he does some scam to just maintain a living. He tried to scam this foreigner, or clueless tourist, or he thought was clueless, but he turned out not to be. So he tried to scam this clueless tourist, but this tourist was actually scamming him. So this tourist was a guy called Laurent Thierry. He's part of like a major gang who do like big time scams on like really rich people. They're like a crew, so a bit like Ocean's 11, who just like do a massive setup to get like rich people to hand over their money, and it tend to be like really bad rich people. So Laurent hires Makoto into the gang, helps him, you know, learn the life of like being like a high class con artist, scam artist. So the show is like split up into 3 parts, but like these 3 parts have their own story. So the first one's based in LA, where they try to scam this LA director by selling him, it's called the Los Angeles Collection. So they try to sell this drug called Sakura Magic. The drug doesn't do anything, but the way they scammed this director or producers by saying, hey, yeah, it makes you super addictive and super hyperactive, and it's gonna sell out, and everyone's gonna be really just all over this, and you're gonna make a lot of money. And
yeah, it's better than Coke, mate.
Yeah. So the director, I want to sell this so I can sell it within LA and Hollywood, and yeah, he turned out he didn't do anything. Then there's one based in Singapore. So this was I don't know if it's based in the future, but it's like an alternative timeline of current Earth. There's like a flying race show that happens in Singapore, but there's nothing like this in real life. But there's a flying race show, and they want to like swindle the guy who runs this race show called Sam Ibrahim, where his brother kept on winning, and it's no wonders why, because it's pretty much rigged every time so his brother could win. And so the team tried to swindle money out of him through like making like a fake casino and making his Sam Ibrahim bet on some of the races, and then tricked him like the races he was watching weren't the actual races, and he bet like a lot of money in a final race and he was duped into losing all his money, and it turned out that when he came back to the casino it was completely gone, so that was a really fun one. Then the next one was like Snow of London, which was based in Paris. It was about this art dealer or art appraiser called James Coleman, and Cynthia, who's also part of this scam artist gang that Lawrence is part of. She's like the head of the gang. She had dealings with him before, because before she was part of the gang, she was living in Paris with her then boyfriend, who was trying to be a famous artist but wasn't really selling, and he was very good at imitating famous art pieces. So this guy, James Coleman, made him paint all these imitations and set it off as like the real thing, which really didn't sit well with Cynthia, and saw it breaking down her boyfriend, because he was getting really stressed making sure he paints the best imitation as possible. So she left him, but she hated James Coleman, and James Coleman was basically just trying to swindle everyone, and he tried to get money from auctioning these famous art pieces, but then he had this backup of like someone to buy it instead.
Yeah, so like the paintings he wanted the most himself, he basically got someone to buy for him. Like in the Snow of London, it's this one really lonely woman that teamed up with him, and he pretends to be in love with her, and she's kind of blinded by it, but he makes her buy all these paintings that he really want for high sums of money to put in a secret room that they can just look at the paintings and laugh about how much they sold the painting for.
Yeah, so they swindle him by making him buy a fake art piece called Snow of London that was painted by Cynthia's ex-boyfriend again, and it was a really good one. That was actually probably my favorite piece. Like Snow of London was better than the Singapore one and the LA one. But the show was pretty good. It was different. I never seen an anime do this. Like I've seen like plenty of like scam artists, con artists kind of films and TV shows, but not anime. So that was nice, like a nice change of like something I've seen within the anime world. There was a nice range of characters. Laurent, the French tourist one, not the leader, but like maybe second in command. He was a pretty cool guy. The main protagonist, Edamaru, or Edamame, nicknamed by Laurent, he was fun.
Yeah, and also another fun thing with like Edamame was he always said, I don't want to be part of this, like every single time, and he always tried to turn his life around just to get roped back in. So you kind of felt sorry for him, but you also kind of felt like, oh, you seem like the person who's good at this, but I guess also because he's been doing it for so long, and it's also like his backstory is so sad when you find out how he actually got into crime, that he was tricked to scam without knowing he scammed. He just thought he was selling products, and then he found out, oh, it's actually a scam, and then he just got jailed, and he was like, what happened?
Yeah, and he couldn't get a job afterwards. So yeah, you don't feel like, throughout the show you don't feel like this scam artist team is bad people. I guess because they're scamming really rich, like evil people. So yeah, this anime kind of balances it that way. But
yeah, and also like the way they scam it, like with the Los Angeles guy, he already sold drugs as it was, but he kept buying off the police or something to not get arrested. So they were like, yeah, we're just gonna make this whole thing that he can't get out of it now. And with the Singapore's guy, again with like Sam Ibrahim buying off basically all the racers to make sure his brother would win. And if they didn't do it, he would sabotage their flights, and he even made someone hurt someone enough that they are now paralyzed on their legs.
Yeah.
And in the Snow of London, it's also like you see how James Coleman just ruins the life of everyone. Like he ruins the lives of people who buy the paintings for him by faking being in love with them, and he also ruined the life of this artist that Cynthia was with, because even the artist that Cynthia was with didn't want to be known for painting copies. He wanted to be known for his own art. And it just felt like he couldn't get out of the contract that he signed with this sleazy guy.
Yeah, all three stories were well told, and given that there weren't many episodes, each one I think was 6 episodes dedicated to each story in the first season. So characters are really interesting, but like they don't have too much backstory. Like there's one called Abigail Jones, who's like this girl who has like amazing physical abilities, but she has a bit of a attitude or like very dismissive personality, but you understand why, because her family was involved in like a war conflict, so she's kind of like
and
not
she
traumatized,
was,
but she was like really
I think she is, but she really hides it, because the thing is, like, where she lived, I think it was it back that they made her from or something, and they had a storyline where it got bombed, and the kids who lost their parents would then be brought in to be child soldiers, so she's basically been a child soldier.
Okay, so yeah, she is traumatized. But yeah, she was interesting, but they didn't delve into too much people's backstory. Cynthia's backstory with her French boyfriend in Paris, that was really interesting because she came across as very confident. No one can stop her. She's really skilled and experienced in her role, but you realize that she has a backstory where she wasn't like this. She was very, air quotes, innocent and just a normal woman just doing her life.
Yeah.
And she got hurt as well, so they gave a bit of backstory in that sense.
And also the way they weaved their backstories into the cases, like with Abigail's backstory, they did it in the Singapore case because the guy who is now can't walk because of his accident was apparently one of the people who bombed her home, and that's why we dive into her backstory. And with the Snow of London, the reason we dive into Cynthia's backstory is because James Coleman is really intertwined with her backstory, so it's very seamless and it's not randomly out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And the same with even Edamem's backstory, that is like, it's told in a way so it twines into the story and it doesn't feel very like, oh, this is just exposition so you know the character. Like, it's very seamless the way they did it.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, really good anime, really good art style, really good stories told. But there's one thing sometimes I would like zone out of the story because there's so much happening in one case. Like, there's so many little things to keep track of. So sometimes I would zone out in like episodes, like in some parts, because there's just so much going on. And then the problem is if you zone out within a few minutes, then you would I would personally struggle to like keep track, like especially the Singaporean one. Like, there was a lot of things to like keep track of, like, Sam's was trying to swindle, but then his brother didn't actually want to swindle, and trying to like rig the race. His brother didn't want to rig the race, and there was something about like who's engineering the airplanes and this and that. So sometimes that would just put me off. Like, there's so many things to keep track of. That's why like Great Pretender, I wouldn't actually recommend it to too many people. Like, some people that I know they're interested in animes that maybe are about swindling or about con scams, but in general, I wouldn't really recommend Great Pretender. Like, it was good, like the ideas and the execution once you get to the end was good. Like, when you see the final ending of how they swindled the bad guy in each case, it's really satisfying. So it gives you that satisfaction, but the in-between stuff is a bit not heavy going but overwhelming because there's so many things to keep track of.
Yeah, and it also, I also feel like if they had stretched it out over more than those 5 episodes, it would also become too long. So it's like, you can definitely tell they did that whole, like, it's a balance that they tried to do. And it's not that it doesn't work, but like you said, like, sometimes you do kind of zone out. Not necessarily because it's bad, but just like, yeah, you kind of zone out in between. Like, you definitely can't watch it when you're like about to fall asleep. You have to be awake for it, kind of. But it's quite good. I like the futuristic styles of everything, and the character designs are really good. The humor is fun. I would personally put it in a handsome pick. I wouldn't put it down the rabbit hole. I don't feel like it was that off the mark, but I would put it in a handsome pick.
Okay, so handsome pick for Great Pretender.
And next up is... Last Exile. And this is actually, I think this is one of the first animes outside of like Pokemon and stuff that I watched because it came on Danish TV like really randomly, and I was like, oh, this looks so cool. But I was like, what's its name? And then I tried to remember its name, and then ages later I found it on DVD at an anime convention, and I was like, oh, I'm so glad, and I got around to watching it. But I actually finished it first time when I watched it with Cheshire. So like every other time I tried to watch it, I got like halfway through or more than halfway through, and then it was like, oh, it's kind of tough to watch the ending. But then I watched it with you, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I got around to watching the ending. And the reason it's tough to watch the ending is not because the anime is bad, it's just because it's also one of those, there's a lot going on, and I believe it's like 25, 26 episodes, so it's like, it's not even that long taken into consideration. It's like a lot of animes are 25, 26 episodes, but it's a futuristic anime where everyone, or a lot of people transport by flying these things called Luftwaffe ships. And so we follow Klaus and Lavi, who, they're basically orphans, like their parents are dead. And so the way they earn money for food is to fly their Luftwaffe ship and deliver messages. And each message comes in a tube with like, how tough is this message to deliver? So you can get anywhere between, I think it's 1 to like 7, 8 or like is it 10 stars? I don't even know what the biggest star is, but it's leveled by stars. And so usually they do like 3-star jobs because it's like they're safe enough to do, but they still give more money than the 1 and 2-star, because the more stars there are on your message tube, the more you make.
Yeah.
And so they try to deliver these messages back and forth. And one thing they also do is join a race every once in a while, because if you win that race, you can also get a money prize. But one day they accidentally come across this one guy who has a tube with, is it 7 or 8 stars, I believe?
7.
And he has been, it's a 7-star job he has, where he has to deliver a girl to this legendary ship called the Sylvana. And I think the Sylvana in this universe is a bit like what Titanic was when it was first made in real world. That it's like this big ship that's like indestructible, the best crew in the world, like really renowned. And so they find this guy and he's been shot, and he has this girl on his lap, and he's like, hey, I don't know who you are. Take this tube, you need to deliver her. It's really, really important. It's like life and death. And so they're like, oh, okay. And so this girl, she's being chased by these ships that are star-shaped, and they're from a very specific race of people. But they then go to the Sylvana with this girl. And I don't remember how, but somehow they end up hanging around on the Sylvana with this girl, and one of the pilots, like Klaus, he pilots and Lavi, she co-pilots, and Klaus, he's like, yeah, let's just stay, and he wants to help them fight all these enemies they have, and they're really curious about who this girl is. And this girl, it turns out her name is Alvis, and Alvis turns out to be this thing called, well, she's a key to something called the Exile. And apparently if you activate the Exile, depending on who you are, you can either destroy the world or you can make it flourish. And so it's really important that they keep Alvis away from this race of people that I know Dio is part of. There's a character called Dio, and he's like the prince of these people who also try to fight to get this Exile because they want to take over the world. And the Sylvana just wants the girl to go to the Exile so they can cure the world. And so that's basically what the main fight is about. And so it's very steampunk, a lot of soldiers, a lot of fights, and especially in the air. And it's really well choreographed, these fights. And yeah, Klaus has this he does this thing called the Emailman turn, which is like his what's it called? It's like his
Vanship?
No, not his vanship. I can't remember it. Anyway, Klaus always does this thing called the Emailman turn. It's the thing he's best at doing. And Dio is very impressed by that. He wants to learn how to do it. So they have this kind of friendship. And yeah, so it can be difficult to figure out if you should love or hate Dio, because he's just overall usually quite fun, not taking things too seriously, but you also know he wants to capture Alvis at some point. Or at least his sister does. His sister is really hardcore. And yeah, it's not really that it's slow paced, but it again, like the other animes, it does take a certain mindset to kind of watch it, because it can feel long with all the fights going on and all the politics.
Yeah, I remember it being quite interesting in the beginning when you meet Klaus and Lavi, who they're the one who found Alvis, and they decided to deliver her, but I guess they struggled, and then they go on to Sylvana and they meet Alexander Rowe, and then from there till when we meet to the final battle, it was like a lull, if that makes sense, between the stories of like, because it was just seeing the journey of the Sylvana going through races and doing the. What did the Sylvana do any races?
No, the Sylvana did a lot of fights. They had to fight off a lot of enemies, and they had to. I know they went to they basically did a pit stop somewhere where one of the characters met old soldier crews and stuff like that. And also because we cut between other characters doing like there are soldiers on some of these ships who fight each other for some reason. So it's like a lot of politics.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what made me not be super engaged, and I do remember enjoying it, especially I really thought Alexander Rowe was a really cool captain of the ship. He was very well thought out as a character, and then Lavi and Klaus were really nice protagonists. But this thing with Alvis and trying to run away from what's the name
I think it's the guild that they're running away from.
Yeah, so running away from the guild. Then there's also these other little things like the Anatore family, was it or the House of Anatore. I didn't understand what they were about. I just didn't understand how they fit into the storylines at some points. So there's all these other factors added into the storyline
Yeah.
But the main story was trying to get Alvis delivered. Who are they trying to deliver Alvis to? Do you remember?
No, they're trying to deliver her to the place where she activates the exile. And
Right.
also it's like, that's why, you know, somewhere in the episode there's this auction for like a little black box that looks like nothing, but apparently you need this black box also to activate the exile. So it's like there are a lot of things that you need to activate the exile. So it's not that the it's not that the journey doesn't make sense, but it does feel like it kind of draws out in the middle episodes, and I think also that's why it can feel difficult to finish the anime, even though it's not necessarily bad. It's just there's a lot of like politics and stakes that are packed in, and you really need to pay attention to it.
Yeah. It's definitely one that, you know, if you don't concentrate, you will really fall out. Because visually it's very, like, there's nothing like, in terms of like sensory stuff, like it's not like flashing, it's not like loads of action, it's not like bright colors to keep you like your attention. It's very dark, you know, the colors are chosen like grey, white and black, and maybe
like
dark
very,
blue for the clouds.
Yeah, very
And
real world colors.
I suppose real world, but like there's not like a lot of like things to snap your attention back into the show. So you really need to pay attention to it if you really want to enjoy it. But the characters are really interesting. I feel like maybe after watching, I still felt I was a bit like, I'm not sure about some of the side characters or how they fit into the plot, and I'm guessing it's because in the manga they probably explains them a bit better, and it's an anime. Sometimes anime and manga translation isn't always perfect, so
Yeah.
at some points those characters felt a bit, oh, okay, you're on this crew, you hate them, oh, now you like them, oh, you're an ally, are you really an ally because aren't you part of the guild? Like at some points it got me a bit confused, and so yeah, it doesn't follow like generic storylines of heroes and villains. Sometimes someone from the guild could jump in and be part of the Sylvana. I think there was someone like Dio, right? Was it Dio? I don't know. There's someone who was part of the guild but then joins the Sylvana because
I think that's Dio, and he has this one servant, and in the start it's because they're captured, and then later I think they join, and I don't really remember why they do, but I do believe they do. Yeah, but it's very like, it's a steampunk war anime basically, and like, yeah, like the Luft ships are really, really good. It's like all CGI is very well made. The fights are well made. Like, it's not, the music is quite nice. I love the opening theme to Last Exile. I actually really, really love it. I never thought I would love an opening that has bagpipes in it, but I do. I really love that opening.
So I would put it in like Handsome Pig, just because it takes a lot of mental energy to watch this.
Yeah, and also it's like, I do think I could rewatch it, but it's also like, yeah, I understand, like if I want to rewatch it, it has to be like, tell my friends I'm watching this and I need to focus on it, I can't sit on my phone, but it's like, it has rewatchability in my opinion, and I think you will, because I feel like every time I rewatch it, I appreciate it a bit more, but it definitely takes some getting into, and it's definitely not for everyone. And I'm curious how, because I know there's another one called Last Exile Silver Fang or something that's supposed to be okay, but I haven't seen it, so I wonder if that's the same or if it's a bit more flashy, because it looks a bit more, I guess, aimed at younger audiences than Last Exile, because Last Exile is definitely aimed at a more mature audience. But I would agree with you that A Handsome Pig is probably where it would go, because it definitely takes mental energy to watch it.
Okay, so Last Exile, Handsome Pig. Alright, that was episode 2 of season 2. Wait, is this a season? I don't know if this is a season. Series tier list 2.2. Hope you enjoyed that. We have one more coming out. I don't think it will come out next week, so probably the week after or the week after that. So Alice, if you can move your butt and release some videos, that would be great. But in the meantime, time for the generic ending ad. Thank you guys so much for watching our video.
If you liked our video, make sure to give it a like. And if you like what we do, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell.
See you guys in the next one.
Bye!